My alien bride wasn't what I expected. She was the galaxy's ruler. Ethan had always considered himself a practical man. He liked routines, schedules, and knowing what to expect. His life was orderly in the way most people's lives tend to be, filled with the familiar rhythm of work, friends, and weekends spent reading or taking walks in the park. He never thought anything truly extraordinary would happen to him. Yet, that all changed the day he met Lyra. It was a crisp autumn morning, the kind where the sun paints everything gold, and the leaves crunched pleasantly underfoot. Ethan had been attending an international science conference in the city. The event was full of brilliant minds, people who had dedicated their lives to pushing the boundaries of knowledge. Ethan enjoyed the energy of such gatherings, the excitement of ideas, the quiet satisfaction of connecting with others who cared deeply about the world. He never expected that in the middle of a crowded auditorium, he would meet someone who would change his life entirely. Lyra appeared as if she had stepped out of a dream. She was striking, but not in an exaggerated way. Her presence had a quiet confidence, a calm aura that seemed to pull attention without effort. Ethan first noticed her during a coffee break when she had politely excused herself past the line to reach the refreshment table. He watched her move with grace and precision, noticing small details, the way she held herself, the way she tilted her head slightly when listening to someone, as if she were absorbing every word deeply. When their eyes met, Ethan felt a strange, inexplicable pull. It wasn't just that she was beautiful, though she certainly was. It was something more subtle. There was intelligence there, yes, but also curiosity, humor, and a warmth that made him want to know her. He felt his usual calm demeanor falter for a moment, replaced by the nervous excitement of someone standing at the edge of something new.
He hesitated, unsure if he should approach, but within moments, she turned and offered him a small, genuine smile.
Ethan felt an immediate connection, as if a silent understanding had passed between them. He introduced himself, and she responded with her name, Lyra, in a voice that was soft yet clear, melodic without being showy. Their conversation began cautiously, the kind of small talk strangers often engage in at conferences. Yet, something unusual happened. The usual awkward gaps in conversation never appeared. Instead, words flowed naturally between them, and Ethan was struck by how easily they could talk about almost anything. Lyra asked insightful questions and listened with genuine interest, not the polite, surface-level attention most people give. She made him feel heard in a way he had never experienced before. Over the next few hours, they walked together through the exhibits and presentations. Ethan found himself pointing out details he normally would have ignored, wanting to share them with her. Lyra responded thoughtfully, offering observations that were unexpected and often surprising. She seemed to notice patterns and connections that others missed. Ethan felt a growing admiration for her intelligence and a subtle unease. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, and he couldn't quite figure out why. By the end of the day, Ethan had invited Lyra to dinner. To his surprise, she accepted without hesitation. That evening they dined at a small, quiet restaurant away from the conference halls. Over the soft hum of conversations around them and the gentle clinking of cutlery, Ethan learned more about Lyra. She spoke with a combination of humility and confidence, sharing stories that hinted at an unusual life filled with unique experiences. Though she did not give many personal details, Ethan noticed small inconsistencies, or perhaps anomalies, that he could not explain. She seemed to know things about the world in ways that went beyond formal study. Her references to events, places, and ideas suggested a perspective far broader than most people possessed. Ethan felt both fascinated and slightly unsettled. It was as if there were layers to Lyra that he could not yet see. Yet, the more he learned, the more he wanted to know. There was a magnetic pull to her presence, something intangible that drew him closer. He laughed more than he had in weeks, and when she laughed, it was genuine, not the forced or rehearsed laughter he often encountered in social situations. Ethan began to realize that he had spent much of his life looking for something extraordinary without even knowing it. And somehow, he had found it in Lyra. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Ethan and Lyra continued to meet, sometimes in cafes, sometimes at parks or museums. Ethan found himself opening up to her in ways he rarely did with anyone else. He spoke of his childhood, his dreams, the quiet hopes he kept hidden even from his closest friends. Lyra listened attentively, her eyes reflecting empathy and understanding. At the same time, small peculiarities continued to appear. Lyra had an almost unnatural knowledge of subjects beyond the ordinary. She could recall minute details from history, science, and art with ease, and she often made connections between things that seemed unrelated. Ethan noticed that she occasionally asked questions that hinted at understanding not just human behavior but systems and concepts, on a scale he could not fully comprehend. One evening, as they walked through a quiet city street under the glow of streetlights, Ethan decided to voice his curiosity. "Lyra, you know so much, and you understand things in ways I can't even describe. Where did you learn all this?" Lyra paused, looking up at the stars that twinkled above the city. She smiled faintly, almost wistfully. "I've traveled a lot," she said simply, "seen more than most people ever will. Experienced things that are, well, unusual." Ethan laughed nervously. "Unusual? That's putting it lightly." She looked at him, her gaze steady and thoughtful. "You'll understand one day, or maybe you won't, but that doesn't matter. What matters is the connection we have here, in this moment." Ethan felt a strange sense of relief. He didn't fully understand her, but that seemed almost irrelevant. There was something real in their connection, something beyond explanations or logic. He realized that part of life's beauty lay in the mystery, in encountering someone who defied all expectations, yet felt completely right. Days turned into weeks, and their bond grew stronger. Ethan noticed how easy it was to be himself around Lyra, how naturally their conversations flowed, and how he anticipated her presence with a sense of joy and curiosity. Yet, the feeling of underlying mystery never left him. There was an unspoken depth to Lyra, a sense that she carried knowledge and experiences far beyond the ordinary human world. It was during one quiet evening, sitting together on a bench in a small park, that Ethan first began to sense the magnitude of what he might be dealing with. Lyra was unusually quiet, staring at the night sky. Ethan followed her gaze. "Sometimes I feel like the universe is bigger than I can even imagine," she said softly. "And yet, here we are, two small parts of it meeting, connecting. Isn't that strange?" Ethan nodded.
Yes, strange but beautiful. She smiled, turning to him. Exactly.
That's all that matters. At that moment, Ethan felt a mixture of awe and wonder. There was something extraordinary about Lyra, something that went beyond beauty, intelligence, or charm. He didn't yet know what it was, but he sensed that his life was about to change in ways he could never have predicted. He also realized that the more he tried to understand her, the more he discovered that understanding her fully might be impossible. But that did not diminish his admiration or affection. And so, life continued. Ethan found himself looking forward to their meetings with anticipation, feeling excitement in places he had long forgotten existed. He felt alive in a way that had been missing from his orderly, predictable life. And although small hints of mystery and strangeness lingered around Lyra, they were eclipsed by the joy, warmth, and connection she brought into his world. It was clear to Ethan that meeting Lyra was not just a chance encounter. It was the beginning of something transformative, something that would challenge his ideas of reality, relationships, and the very limits of human understanding. Yet, at the same time, it was simple. A story of two people meeting, connecting, and discovering each other in a world that often seemed mundane. Ethan did not know what the future held. He only knew that, for the first time in his life, he was ready to embrace the unknown. Ethan had grown accustomed to the rhythm of his days with Lyra. They met frequently, sometimes for quiet dinners, sometimes for long walks in the park, and occasionally for visits to museums or exhibitions. Every moment with her brought him joy, fascination, and, admittedly, a sense of curiosity that often bordered on unease. There was always something slightly mysterious about her, an edge of the unknown that made him both anxious and excited. One weekend, Lyra invited him to visit her personal residence, as she called it. Ethan, naturally, was curious. He had been to her apartment before, but she insisted this place was different, more private, and that he would understand soon enough why it mattered. Ethan did not question her. By now, he had learned to trust her intuition, even if he did not fully. When he arrived, he was greeted by a building unlike anything he had ever seen. The architecture was elegant, yet unconventional. Smooth curves and unusual angles combined with materials that seemed to shimmer subtly in the sunlight. It was neither modern nor classical, and yet it seemed perfectly balanced. Ethan felt a twinge of awe, realizing that even the building itself reflected Lyra's uniqueness. Inside, the residence was equally remarkable. The rooms were spacious, filled with light that seemed to come from no particular source. Objects adorned the space that Ethan could not immediately recognize. Some looked like works of art, others like tools or devices, but all of them carried a sense of purpose and intelligence. He walked slowly, touching nothing, absorbing every detail. Lyra watched him quietly, a faint smile on her lips.
"You see things differently than most people," she said. "That's why I wanted you here. I trust you to understand, even if it takes time." Ethan felt a mixture of curiosity and apprehension.
Understand what? He asked cautiously. She led him to a room that seemed like a study, though it defied any conventional description of one.
Screens or panels covered the walls, displaying symbols, patterns, and images that Ethan could not recognize. Some appeared to move subtly, like living pictures. Others displayed maps of stars and constellations he did not know existed. He stepped closer, trying to make sense of it, but nothing seemed familiar. Lyra came up beside him and placed a hand on his shoulder. The touch was reassuring, grounding him in a moment that was becoming increasingly surreal. "Ethan," she said softly, "there is something you need to know about me. Something important." He looked at her, sensing the gravity in her tone. His heart began to race. "What is it?" he asked, a nervous edge to his voice. Lyra took a deep breath and began. "I am not entirely human, Ethan. I am from another world, another civilization far beyond Earth. And more than that, I am responsible for leading that civilization. In many ways, I am what you might call a ruler of a galaxy." Ethan blinked, trying to process the words. He felt as if the ground had shifted beneath him. "A ruler of a galaxy?" he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. He wanted to laugh, to ask if she was joking, but the seriousness in her eyes told him this was no joke. "I understand that this is difficult to believe," Lyra continued gently. "Even for me, it is hard to explain in ways that make sense. But I assure you, everything I have told you is true." Ethan stumbled back a step, his mind racing. He tried to recall everything about Lyra, the strange knowledge she possessed, the way she seemed to understand systems and events far beyond normal human comprehension, the small anomalies he had noticed but never questioned too deeply. It all suddenly made sense, and yet it was overwhelming. Why yet? Why tell me this? He asked, his voice trembling slightly. Why me? Lyra smiled faintly, almost sadly. Because I chose to. Because despite everything, I wanted someone in my life who saw me as I am, not just as a leader or a symbol. You are human, yes, but you have something rare: curiosity, empathy, honesty. I trust you, and I care about you. That is why you need to know the truth. Ethan sank into a nearby chair, trying to make sense of the revelation. His thoughts were a whirlwind of disbelief, awe, and fear. He wanted to ask a million questions, yet he felt frozen, unsure where to begin. He thought about their conversations, her insights, her wisdom. Everything suddenly fell into a new light. And yet he felt a strange disorientation, as if the world he had known had tilted on its axis. Lyra sat opposite him, her presence calm and steady. She continued to explain, carefully choosing her words. I am not just a visitor from another world. I am responsible for the lives of billions. My decisions affect entire civilizations, entire ecosystems, and entire systems of planets. My role is vast, and it is sometimes lonely. That is why I chose to seek connection with someone like you. I wanted a relationship based on trust, not obligation or duty. Ethan listened, absorbing each word slowly. The enormity of what she was telling him was almost too much to comprehend. It was as if every story he had ever read about rulers, leaders, or extraordinary beings was suddenly real and standing before him. Yet, despite the overwhelming truth, there was a sincerity in her eyes, a vulnerability that made him believe her.
I don't know what to say, Ethan admitted finally. This is
A lot. I can't even imagine what it must be like to carry that kind of responsibility. Lyra nodded. It is a burden, yes, but also a privilege. And I want to share part of that with you, not because I need you to understand everything, but because I want you to be part of my life in a meaningful way. You chose to be with me, knowing only a fraction of who I am. That choice is why I trust you now with the rest. Ethan felt a wave of emotions: fear, excitement, awe, and something else he could not name. He realized that this revelation did not push him away. Instead, it drew him closer, creating a sense of intimacy unlike anything he had ever experienced. He was standing at the threshold of a world far beyond his own, and he was invited in, not as an observer, but as a participant.
For hours, Lyra patiently answered his questions.
She spoke about her world, her civilization, and her responsibilities, though she carefully avoided overwhelming him with details he could not yet process. She described the vastness of her galaxy, the diversity of life forms, and the complex systems she helped oversee. Ethan felt a mixture of wonder and humility, realizing how small Earth was in the grand scheme of things, and how incredible it was that he had somehow become part of her story. Despite the enormity of it all, Lyra never spoke with arrogance or superiority. Instead, she shared her experiences with honesty and a quiet humility, revealing both the burdens and the beauty of her role. She spoke of the loneliness that often accompanied leadership on such a scale, of the challenges of balancing duty with personal desire, and of the rare moments of connection that reminded her of what made life meaningful.
Ethan listened intently, occasionally asking questions, often just absorbing the information in stunned silence.
He realized that his initial fear was being replaced by something deeper, a sense of awe and admiration for Lyra, not just as a partner, but as a being whose life and experiences stretched far beyond his own. As the night wore on, Ethan began to understand that their relationship would never be ordinary. It would be extraordinary, filled with challenges and revelations he could not yet imagine. Yet, there was a quiet reassurance in Lyra's presence, a promise that, despite the complexity of her life, she valued him, cared for him, and wanted him by her side. By the end of the evening, Ethan felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. He had crossed a threshold into a world he had never dreamed existed, and yet he felt grounded by the sincerity and warmth of Lyra's presence. He realized that understanding her fully might take a lifetime. And even then, some aspects of her life would remain beyond his grasp. But that did not matter. What mattered was the connection they shared, the trust they had built, and the choice to face the unknown together. As he left the residence that night, Ethan looked up at the stars above the city. They seemed brighter, more vast, more alive than he had ever noticed before. For the first time, he felt the weight of the universe in a tangible way, and he felt a strange, comforting sense of belonging. He understood that life had just changed in ways he could not yet predict, and that he would never be the same again. Days that followed were filled with reflection. Ethan tried to return to his ordinary routines, but nothing felt quite the same. He noticed details in the world he had overlooked before, the way sunlight danced on buildings, the subtle rhythms of human behavior, and the quiet beauty of a city at dawn. And through it all, Lyra remained a constant presence, her existence a reminder of the extraordinary possibilities that life could hold. Ethan realized that their journey had only just begun. The revelation of Lyra's true identity was not an ending, but a beginning, a doorway into a world of discovery, growth, and wonder that stretched far beyond the limits of his previous imagination. And despite the uncertainty, he felt ready to step through it, guided by trust, curiosity, and the growing love he felt for someone who was, in every sense, unlike anyone he had ever known. Ethan's life had changed completely since Lyra revealed her true identity. Every day felt like stepping into a world he had only ever read about in books or imagined in dreams. The realization that his partner was not only from another civilization, but also a ruler of an entire galaxy was both thrilling and overwhelming. He tried to hold on to his normal routines, but slowly he realized that normality no longer applied. The first challenge came almost immediately. Lyra invited him to accompany her to a council meeting of leaders from her civilization. Ethan had never been outside Earth before, except for the occasional flight, so the idea of interstellar travel was terrifying and exciting at the same time. He stepped onto a ship unlike anything he had ever seen. Its smooth surfaces gleamed in a way that felt alive, and inside, panels of light shifted like liquid, responding to the touch of its passengers.
Lyra guided him gently, noticing his hesitation.
"You don't have to understand everything right now," she said, her voice calm and comforting. "Just observe."
Let yourself feel it. You'll learn in time. The journey itself was unlike any experience Ethan had known. Space stretched endlessly around him, filled with colors and patterns he could barely describe. He felt weightless at times, yet grounded by Lyra's presence beside him. As he looked out at stars, nebulae, and distant planets, he realized the universe was far more magnificent than anything he had imagined. His chest tightened with awe, and a small thrill of fear crept in. When they arrived, Ethan was introduced to leaders from countless planets, each looking different, speaking in tones he barely understood. Yet, despite the diversity, he sensed a shared purpose and intelligence that surpassed human standards. He struggled to keep up with their discussions, but Lyra remained by his side, offering brief explanations and translating concepts into ways he could grasp. Ethan felt both intimidated and fascinated. He had entered a world where decisions impacted billions of lives, where strategy, diplomacy, and wisdom were not just skills but lifelines. He realized that being with Lyra meant stepping into responsibilities he had never imagined. It was exciting, yes, but it also carried a heavy weight. He felt small in comparison, yet somehow needed. Returning to Earth, Ethan noticed that even simple daily routines no longer felt simple. Every conversation, every decision was colored by what he had learned and seen. He tried to return to his old life, but it felt flat, ordinary, and lacking. Even his friends noticed he had changed, commenting on a new seriousness in his gaze, a quiet confidence that had not been there before. Lyra helped him navigate these challenges patiently. She never scolded or forced him to adapt quickly, understanding that his human perspective was valuable in its own right. "Your perspective matters," she reminded him often. "Even if you feel small in this vast universe, you bring something no one else can." Ethan discovered that life with Lyra was a constant mix of wonder and difficulty. He learned about interstellar laws, trade, and communication networks that connected planets across vast distances. He struggled to understand alien customs and rituals that had been in place for centuries. He made mistakes, mispronouncing names, misinterpreting gestures, even misunderstanding subtle social cues. But Lyra never laughed at him. She guided him with patience, gently correcting, explaining, and encouraging him. One particularly challenging moment came when he accompanied Lyra to a cultural ceremony on a distant planet. Leaders, representatives, and citizens from various worlds gathered to celebrate a long-standing tradition. Ethan was given a traditional role, which involved rituals completely unfamiliar to him. He felt nervous, out of place, and clumsy. He worried he would embarrass himself, and more importantly, embarrass Lyra. During the ceremony, he hesitated at every step, unsure of the timing, gestures, and words. Lyra noticed his anxiety and gave him a reassuring smile. She whispered instructions softly, and gradually, Ethan found a rhythm. By the end of the ceremony, he was still imperfect, but he had participated fully. He saw admiration and respect in the eyes of those around him, not for perfection, but for effort, honesty, and willingness to engage. Through experiences like this, Ethan began to understand something profound. And being with Lyra was not about matching her abilities or knowledge. It was about presence, effort, and trust. He realized that even in a world of extraordinary beings, his humanity had value. His perspective, his choices, and his empathy mattered. Slowly, he began to accept that his ordinary life had prepared him in ways he hadn't known. Yet, challenges persisted. Media on Earth had started picking up on Lyra's unusual presence. Rumors and speculation about her origin created unease, even fear, among some humans.
Ethan faced judgment from friends, strangers, and colleagues who could not understand the reality he had come to accept.
He felt pressure to defend Lyra, to explain her existence, and to shield their privacy. It was exhausting, and sometimes he wondered if he was capable of handling it. Lyra noticed his struggle and offered guidance.
"You don't have to face it alone," she said one evening as they walked along a quiet riverbank.
"The world may not understand, and that is okay. What matters is our trust, our bond, and the choices we make together."
Those words resonated with Ethan.
He realized that love with Lyra was not about avoiding difficulties or fitting into preconceived notions. It was about navigating challenges, supporting each other, and accepting that their lives would always be different from what most people experienced. As days turned into months, Ethan began to find his place. He learned to navigate the complexities of Lyra's world with increasing confidence. He developed strategies for dealing with alien customs, interstellar communication, and even diplomacy. He found joy in discovering new perspectives, cultures, and ideas. And he found satisfaction in small contributions, offering solutions, sharing human insights, and providing support where Lyra needed it most. One evening, after a long day of meetings and discussions, Ethan and Lyra sat together in a quiet garden on her residence. The sky was painted with shades of orange and purple as the sun set. Ethan looked around, feeling a sense of calm and accomplishment. "I never imagined life could be like this," he said softly. "It's overwhelming at times, but also incredible. I've learned more in these months than I have in my entire life." Lyra reached out and took his hand. That is the point, Ethan. Life is meant to challenge us, to expand our understanding, and to help us grow. You are learning, yes, but you are also teaching. Your humanity brings balance to my world, and I value that more than you know.
Ethan smiled, feeling warmth and pride.
He realized that the initial fear and doubt he had felt were natural, but they had given way to confidence and purpose. He had grown into his role as Lyra's partner, not as a ruler, not as a savior, but as someone who contributed in meaningful ways, simply by being himself. Despite the challenges, their relationship deepened. They shared quiet moments of intimacy, laughter, and conversation. They explored distant planets, attended ceremonies, and met beings from civilizations that seemed beyond imagination. Through it all, Ethan noticed the vulnerability in Lyra, the small moments when her immense responsibilities weighed on her, when she revealed doubts, fears, and the loneliness of her role. And he realized that these moments, shared with trust and openness, strengthened their bond. Ethan began to appreciate the beauty in the ordinary, even within an extraordinary context. A simple conversation over tea, a quiet walk under alien stars, or a shared laugh at a minor mishap became precious moments. He realized that life with Lyra was not about grandeur alone. It was about connection, understanding, and shared experiences, no matter how small or vast. At times, Ethan faced inner conflicts. He missed the simplicity of his old life, the predictability and comfort of familiar routines. He sometimes wondered if he could ever truly belong in Lyra's world. But every time he expressed doubt, Lyra reminded him that belonging was not about sameness. It was about choice, effort, and love. Through these experiences, Ethan matured in ways he had never anticipated. He learned patience, empathy, and adaptability. He discovered that courage was not only facing physical dangers, but also navigating unfamiliar cultures, standing by someone you love despite judgment, and embracing change without losing oneself. Months of adaptation led to small victories. Ethan participated in interstellar conferences with growing confidence, learned the etiquette of alien leaders, and even contributed suggestions that Lyra valued. He realized that his perspective as a human offered insights no one else could provide. For the first time, he felt that he truly belonged in her world, not as a ruler, not as an outsider, but as a partner, equal in trust, respect, and shared purpose. One quiet night, sitting on a balcony overlooking a vast city of lights and movement, Ethan reflected on his journey. He had come from an ordinary life, believing in routines and predictability. Now he lived in a universe of wonder, responsibility, and complexity. He had faced fear, doubt, and overwhelming challenges. But he had also experienced joy, growth, and profound connection. Lyra joined him silently, wrapping an arm around his shoulder. "You've grown, Ethan," she said softly. "Not just in understanding my world, but in discovering your own strength, resilience, and value. You are part of this universe in a way that matters." Ethan smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and love. He realized that life with Lyra was not easy, but it was meaningful, transformative, and filled with experiences that went far beyond what he had ever imagined. He understood that the challenges would never fully disappear, but neither would the joy, wonder, and connection that made the journey worthwhile. As he gazed at the stars with Lyra by his side, Ethan knew that he had changed forever. He had entered a world larger than he could have imagined, faced challenges beyond ordinary comprehension, and discovered a love that transcended boundaries. And he understood, with quiet certainty, that the most extraordinary journeys were not just about seeing new worlds, but about growing, adapting, and finding connection in the face of the unknown. Time had passed since Ethan first learned the truth about Lyra. The shock, wonder, and awe that had once left him speechless had slowly transformed into understanding, respect, and deep admiration. Life with Lyra was no longer a whirlwind of confusion and discovery. It had become a shared journey of growth, trust, and connection.
Yet despite all that he had learned, Ethan knew that each day still held surprises, challenges, and opportunities to grow.
Their mornings often began quietly, with a shared cup of tea on the balcony of Lyra's residence. From there, Ethan could see planets and moons in the distance, some glowing softly, others spinning silently through the cosmos. He had grown accustomed to this view, yet it still filled him with awe. Sometimes he would glance at Lyra and smile, feeling grateful for her patience, guidance, and love. She had trusted him with her truth, and he had chosen to stay, to embrace the unknown, and to grow alongside her. One morning, Lyra proposed a journey unlike any other. She wanted Ethan to visit the central hub of her galaxy's civilization, a place where leaders, thinkers, and citizens of countless worlds came together to share knowledge, culture, and ideas. Ethan hesitated at first, remembering the overwhelming experiences of his first interstellar travels, but Lyra took his hand and smiled, reminding him gently, "You've come far. You are ready." The journey itself was mesmerizing. Their ship moved through space with a speed that made Ethan's heart race, yet he felt safe in Lyra's presence. Stars blurred into streaks of light outside the windows, and distant galaxies shimmered in brilliant colors. He marveled at the complexity and beauty of the universe, realizing that his understanding of life had expanded far beyond Earth. Every detail seemed meaningful, every pattern intentional, as if the cosmos itself had invited him into its mysteries. Upon arriving at the central hub, Ethan was struck by its sheer scale and elegance. Structures of incredible design and architecture stretched across miles, blending technology and artistry in ways that defied imagination.
Beings of all shapes and sizes moved gracefully through the city, each engaged in their tasks, yet all exuding a sense of purpose and harmony.
Ethan felt a mixture of humility and excitement. He had stepped fully into a world that once seemed unreachable. Lyra guided him through the hub, introducing him to leaders, scholars, and citizens. Each interaction was a lesson, not only in diplomacy and culture, but also in understanding and empathy. Ethan observed carefully, learning to balance his human perspective with the expectations and norms of an intergalactic civilization. At first, he stumbled with cultural nuances and formalities, but with Lyra's guidance, he gradually adapted. Over time, Ethan found that his contributions were valued. His observations, ideas, and even simple questions often offered insights that the other leaders had overlooked. He realized that being human was not a limitation, but a unique advantage. His perspective grounded Lyra's world in a way that few others could, reminding those around them of the importance of connection, understanding, and compassion.
One evening, after a long day of meetings and discussions, Ethan and Lyra walked through a serene garden that overlooked the hub.
Bioluminescent plants glowed softly, illuminating the path with gentle light. Ethan felt a sense of peace and accomplishment. He had grown into his role as Lyra's partner, navigating challenges he once thought impossible, and contributing to a civilization far beyond his own. Lyra paused, turning to him with a warm smile.
"You've adapted remarkably," she said, "not just to the life but to the responsibility, the challenges, and the beauty of it all."
"You've become a part of this world in ways that matter."
Ethan felt a surge of pride and gratitude.
"I never imagined I could be part of something so vast," he admitted. "But being with you, it makes sense."
"I feel like I found a place where I belong." Lyra took his hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. "You belong here because you choose to belong."
"And because you bring something unique, your humanity, your perspective, and your heart. That is what makes you invaluable." As weeks turned into months, Ethan and Lyra faced new challenges together. They encountered crises in distant planets, disputes between civilizations, and natural disasters that required immediate attention. Each situation tested their problem-solving skills, patience, and resilience. Ethan often felt overwhelmed, but Lyra's steady presence reminded him that he was capable. They worked as a team, combining her vast knowledge and authority with his grounded human perspective. During one critical event, a sudden environmental crisis threatened a distant colony. Ethan's human intuition and empathy proved essential. While Lyra analyzed data, projected outcomes, and strategized responses, Ethan focused on the needs of the people, their fears, and practical solutions that prioritized safety and well-being. Together, they resolved the crisis, earning respect from the leaders and citizens involved. Ethan realized that his contribution mattered, not because it matched Lyra's scale of knowledge, but because it complemented it. Through these experiences, their bond deepened. They learned to communicate not only with words, but with understanding, trust, and subtle gestures. Ethan began to see that love was not only about shared happiness, but also about shared challenges, mutual growth, and facing the unknown together. Every difficulty strengthened their connection. Every success became a shared triumph. Despite the intensity of their lives, they found moments of simplicity and joy. They would watch alien sunsets, explore distant cities, and share quiet meals under the stars. Ethan discovered that even in a universe filled with complexity, small, ordinary moments carried profound meaning. A shared smile, a gentle touch, a conversation at dusk. These moments reminded him that love and connection were at the heart of every extraordinary experience. One evening, as they rested in a quiet chamber overlooking a distant planet, Ethan reflected on his journey. He remembered the initial shock of learning Lyra's truth, the fear and awe he had felt when traveling among alien leaders, and the uncertainty of adapting to her world. He realized that he had grown in ways he never imagined. Emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually, he had discovered courage, empathy, and resilience he didn't know he possessed. Lyra sat beside him, sensing his thoughts.
"You've changed, Ethan," she said softly.
Not because you had to, but because you chose to embrace life, love, and responsibility. That choice has shaped you into someone extraordinary. Ethan smiled, feeling warmth and gratitude.
"I've changed because of you," he replied. "You showed me a world I never knew existed, but also reminded me that my own perspective matters."
You trusted me, and that trust changed everything. Their relationship, once filled with mystery and wonder, had evolved into one of deep, mutual respect, understanding, and love. Ethan realized that Lyra's extraordinary life did not overshadow his own value. Instead, it amplified it, showing him that even ordinary humans could have a meaningful impact in extraordinary circumstances. And together, they began to bridge the gap between Earth and Lyra's civilization. Ethan helped communicate human perspectives, fostering cooperation and understanding between worlds. Lyra, in turn, shared knowledge and opportunities with Earth, encouraging exploration, learning, and collaboration. Their partnership became a symbol of connection, trust, and mutual respect between civilizations. As they stood together one evening, looking out at the vastness of space, Ethan felt a sense of fulfillment. Life had taken him from an ordinary existence on Earth to a role that blended love, responsibility, and adventure on an interstellar scale. He understood that this journey was not just about exploration or discovery. It was about growth, trust, and connection. Lyra turned to him, her eyes reflecting the light of distant stars.
"The universe is vast, Ethan," she said softly. "But we've found our place within it."
Together, Ethan took her hand, squeezing it gently. Together, he echoed, feeling a sense of peace and certainty. He had faced fear, uncertainty, and challenges beyond imagination, yet he knew that as long as they faced life side by side, they could navigate anything. In the months and years that followed, Ethan and Lyra continued to explore, learn, and grow. Their lives were filled with adventure, responsibility, and discovery, yet also with moments of quiet joy and reflection. Ethan had found his place, not as a ruler, not as an alien, but as a partner whose presence mattered, whose voice was valued, and whose love was true. Through it all, Ethan realized that the greatest discoveries were not in distant planets, strange civilizations, or cosmic phenomena. The greatest discoveries were in connection, trust, and the courage to embrace life fully, even when it exceeded imagination. He had entered Lyra's world as a man who thought he understood life, only to discover that the universe was far larger, more beautiful, and more meaningful than he had ever dreamed. And in the end, Ethan understood that love, true, enduring love, could span galaxies, transcend differences, and transform lives. He had chosen to embrace the unknown, and in doing so, he had found a home, a purpose, and a partner for life. Together they faced the cosmos, not as ruler and human, not as alien and earthling, but as companions bound by trust, understanding, and a love that made the universe feel just a little smaller, warmer, and infinitely more extraordinary.